Today I'm sharing another one-day makeover. This one is super simple. Anyone can do it. There's no priming and no sanding needed to get the paint to stick really well either. This dresser was in great condition to begin with, no scratches to fill or anything like that. So first I removed the drawer pulls with my screwdriver and set them aside. Then I cleaned the dresser with Crud Cutter and an old damp rag. Crud Cutter does a great job at cutting through oils and grime, so it is my favorite cleaner. But you can use dish soap and warm water instead. The goal here is just to remove any oils, dust, or grime on the surface, since they get in the way of letting the paint adhere well. As I was cleaning, I removed the drawers. These ones in particular needed a quick and kind of hard pull to get them to come off the tracks. I laid down a moving blanket to protect my floor, and then I was ready for the paint. For this project, I used Heirloom Traditions paint in the color Oyster. This paint is an all-in-one paint that doesn't need a primer or scuff sanding to make the paint stick, and it doesn't need a top coat either. You can spray it, brush it, roll it, or do a combo of brushing and rolling, whatever floats your boat. This time I tried the roller and the brush combo. So I bought this brush and roller set from Heirloom Traditions. It included a little paint tray, which is pretty cool. Since I want to reuse it in the future, I lined it with some tinfoil so I didn't have to clean it up afterwards. And then I mixed up the paint and poured some into my tray. It did take me a few minutes to get a hang of it, but I basically brushed on the paint with the paintbrush and then I rolled over it with the foam roller. This paint dries really quickly, even though it was like only 60 degrees outside, so I worked in small sections. It seemed to work best when I brushed on a thinner amount of paint and then quickly went back over it with a roller that didn't have much paint on it. I tried not to push too hard so it wouldn't leave lines from the roller's edge, and if there were little bubbles, I tried to roll them out. This technique definitely leaves some texture behind though, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're a beginner or if you don't mind some roller texture. After the first coat of paint, I wrapped everything up with some tinfoil to keep it from drying out before the next coat. And here is what the first coat looked like when it was dry. It felt pretty smooth on the sides of the dresser, but it was kind of rough on the drawer fronts since they were laying flat and it was kind of windy outside. And there were some larger spots of texture that I didn't care for either. So I lightly sanded the paint with 220 grit sandpaper to remove those. This part is totally optional and just a personal preference of mine. After I got rid of the rough texture, I cleaned the dust off with a tack cloth. Real quick before moving on though, I scratched at the paint just to see how well it sticks. I scratched pretty hard, and it was only a few hours after the first coat had been painted. It scratched a tiny bit, which is honestly pretty good after only letting it dry for about 3 hours. So I painted the second coat. This time I feel like the paint dried faster and my brush kind of drug across the surface instead of gliding like the first coat did, but either way it worked out just fine. So this paint says that it will stick to wood, laminate, masonry, leather and vinyl, smooth fabrics, ceramic, glass, and metal. It's also UV and water resistant. I personally have painted slick laminate without sanding or priming beforehand, and after 48 hours it did not scratch off at all, which that is super impressive to me. I didn't feel like there was full coverage after 2 coats of paint, so I ended up with 3 coats total. But with 2 hours of dry time between each coat and me running some errands while the paint dried, I still got it all the way painted between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. that same day. After painting, I cleaned the brush and the roller with warm soapy water while my toddler tried to play with my camera tripod. And I just threw away the tinfoil from the tray. It took about 5 minutes to clean up, and now I can use them all in the future again. I debated getting new hardware or painting the old hardware, but I wanted this to be a quick, easy, and cheap makeover, so I just put the old hardware back on. It's not my favorite, but I think it works. Before I share what it looks like now, please take a second to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and take a second to leave a comment. It really helps get our videos out to more people, so we really appreciate it, and it just makes our day. Alright, here is what it looked like before, and here is what it looks like now. Not too bad for, what, $60 worth of supplies? If you get up close, you can definitely see texture and you can feel it slightly. It's not my favorite. Maybe I'm just doing something wrong, but when you take a couple of steps back, you can't even see the texture, so that's pretty awesome. It does create a perfect texture-free finish when I spray it, so if you have a sprayer, you could spray it. I'm curious though, do you hate texture or would you rather it instead of brush marks? Let me know in the comments.